There is no federal government program, no insurance policy, and no medical procedure that can prevent you and I from dying. For most of us, life seems too relentless to spend much time thinking about death. But coming to grips with our own mortality is a sobering thing we all need to do. Today, more about facing the end the way Jesus did. Stay with us. From Chicago's Moody Church, this is Running to Win with Dr. Erwin Lutzer, whose clear teaching helps us make it across the finish line. Our current series on Running to Win is all about what happens 1 minute after you die. In this, his final message, Erwin Lutzer discusses the providence of God in the death of a Christian and how some of us remain fearful of that final moment.
Today I'm speaking to some of you who have confronted death. You have had to look at it. The doctor has come to you and told you some news that you thought to God would maybe be true of somebody else, but not you. You're reminded of your mortality. You're reminded of the fact that not a one of us has a day guaranteed. And you say to yourself, how can I possibly approach that moment recognizing that I might die? Well, the answer, of course, is this, that God gives us dying grace when we need it. He really does. As long as we don't need it, we don't have it. I don't have dying grace today. But I'd like to think that if I were to die today, God would give me dying grace when I needed it. You know, Corrie ten Boom likes to tell the story of how she said to her father that she was afraid of death, and he said to her, Corrie, when we go on the train to Amsterdam, when do I give you the ticket to get there? And she said, well, just before I board the train. And he said, that's right. And that's the way God is. He does not give us dying grace in advance, but when the time comes, the grace is there. A young woman who observed the death of her godly father said that in his last months, Dad was spending more time in heaven than he was on earth. And that makes sense. That makes sense. There are some people lying on their deathbed who are prepared to go, who already begin to see the glories of heaven. They begin to contemplate the wonder of what it's going to be like to be with Christ. And they are ready to go. They are dying with the right attitude because they know that death leads them to the Father. There's a second assurance that Christ had, and that is He died at the right time. He died at the right time. You can keep your Bible open to Luke chapter 22, but if you turn to John for just a moment, John chapter 13, Jesus is in the upper room, and He's beginning that discourse that all of us know something about. And it says in chapter 13, verse 1, now before the feast of the Passover, Jesus, knowing that His hour had come that He should depart out of this world to the Father, having loved His own who were in the world, He loved them to the end. Did you catch the phrase? Jesus knowing that His hour had come. 3 times before this in the book of John, it says that they could not take Him because His hour was not yet come. I want you to know that Jesus Christ's enemies were totally paralyzed, powerless, until it was time for the crucifixion to take place. There was no chance that Jesus Christ could die early. As a matter of fact, from the book of John we learned that He died between the evenings. He died when the Passover lamb was being slain. And because He typified the lamb, He died exactly when the lambs were dying, according to the will and the purposes and the plan of God. And I might say in passing that, remember, He died at the age of 33. Very young certainly by our standards, and young also by the standards of the Middle East. Why 33 and not 43 or 53 or 63? Think of all of the sermons He could have preached. Think of all of the miracles He could have still performed. All the more people He could have healed. And yet Jesus at the age of 33 was able to say, I have finished the work which Thou gavest me to do. It is finished. It is finished. I want you to know today that you don't have to live a long life in order to complete all of your assignments that God has given for you to do. Even a child who dies within the will of God and has completed that which God has mapped out for that child. And we may wonder and we might ask questions because it might not make sense to us, but those children are within the will and the plan of God, and they too have finished the work that God has given them to do, primarily the work that they are to do in the lives of their parents who have seen them suffer and die. Because the work that God does when someone whom we love dies is deep and lasting, and those little ones have also finished the work which God has given them to do. Now I know it's possible for us to hasten our death through carelessness, through bad eating habits. We can think of ways that people have compromised their health. But at the end of the day, I want you to know that if you walk in the Spirit, there is no combination of demons or men who can possibly gang up on you. There's no one who can shoot you if God still believes that you have work that He wants you to accomplish, and if your work is not yet done. It is really true to say that man is immortal until his work is done. Believers die within the context of God's providence and God's care. Look at Jesus. He was crucified by evil men. And yet it says He was delivered by the predetermined counsel of God. And it says that the Lord was pleased to bruise Him. Are you comfortable living with the juxtaposition of those two theological facts? That on the one hand it is evil men who killed Jesus Christ, and on the other hand it is the Father who bruised Him, and it is the Father who killed Him, and it is Jesus who said, I lay down my life and I take it again. It is I who lay it down. No man takes it from me. I want you to know that what is true of Him is true of us. We can die with the right attitude, and we will die if we walk with God. We will die at the right time. The right time. Let me give you a third assurance that Jesus had, and that is that He died in the right way. He died in the right way. Could Jesus have been stoned to death? No, because it says in the Old Testament, cursed is he who hangs upon a tree, and Jesus had to die on a tree. He had to die on a cross to bear our sin. Therefore, even the means of death was actually ordained. He couldn't have died of a disease, obviously, because He was not